All right, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. We here want to better understand the different aspects of the Pilipinx-American diaspora. We cover topics such as, but are not limited to, history, community, and Filipinx-American culture. And I am your host, Alfredo. And for this episode today, we have our boy Meta Sarmiento. Meta is an MC, an overall artist, a speaker, an educator, a poet. Man, I feel like the list goes on with this dude, and once you hear like his story and everything, it's just so amazing. I mean, one of the first things that we really like went into was just Meta's history when it comes to all his artistry, and it's just wow, like the amount of oh no, something about being motivated or having someone see like the best in you when it comes to your artistry is such a big motivator, and just seeing like how all of that, all of his history has come full circle from being like this kid from Guam and now being this like MC that's like based out in Denver, Colorado, to speaking like at all these like major events, performing at like all these big events and everything. It's just like, yo, this dude has been like putting in the work with like all his music, and just I don't know. He also like went into a lot of different things and like his own authenticity when it comes to being vulnerable on the mic, and it's just I don't even know how to like form the right words to properly describe how this episode went. It's just there was a lot of things that Meta said in this episode that I'm personally taking more to heart when it comes to like my own artistry and my own disciplines and all that. And just to hear his story, just to see like his process and everything is very inspiring. And I hope that everyone will get something out of this episode. And going into the advice section for this episode, Meta was really talking about like the whole authenticity thing, and it really just brought the whole episode full circle from his origins to how things are now. And I hope that y'all will get something out of this advice section as well. And that being said, I present to you episode 6. All right, what's up, everyone? We're back for another episode of the podcast. We have another amazing guest to go along with our cast for season 2. This person is an MC, a poet, an educator, and an amazing speaker. We have Meta on the line. What's up, Meta?
Hey, what's poppin', homie? How you doing?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. So I think, oh, I mean, I just met you during this whole year and everything, like right before the quarantine
Mm,
happened. You were headlining for Unipro Texas's Lumika event back in January. I remember
mm,
us like kicking it back at the Airbnb at the pad and everything, and we are just like
yeah,
talking and just like spitting stuff and like
mm.
connecting like the lines we had with like our mutual connection. And just like, yo, this dude's tight.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. No, I'm so glad that we were able to connect and just like hang out. You know what I mean? Without any pressure and just yeah, just talking authentically and just chilling out. It was dope, man. It was. I'm so glad we connected and met.
Oh, dude, most def, man. Especially with like all the stuff you had to say and like Dude, I still have some of the performances or like some of the sets
Yo,
you had for like that show and everything. I'm just like, yo,
yeah.
dude, your energy is like a whole different level.
I appreciate that. Thank you, bro. Thank you. I need to see that footage. Yo, what's up?
Dude, I'm okay.
Get that over.
This is me in the future. I'm like, yo, okay, I'll send Meta this footage like after this is done.
Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. No, no worries, bro. No, no worries.
But just mainly like I didn't really get the chance to ask you like back then about like your whole journey and everything. But like as an
Mm.
MC, a poet, an educator, and a speaker, like how did you get started with like each artistic platform?
Yeah, for sure. Oh man, I feel like I can make a movie with each of these platforms, but let me try and be concise with it. Um so when I was a kid, I used to hate poetry so much. Like I legit hated poetry. But in the 6th grade, my language arts teacher, Mrs. Reglos, at Beneventi Middle School back in Guam, shout outs to BMS. Um, one day she read one of my journal entries and she was like, Mr. Sarmiento, you write beautifully. If you keep going, one day you'll be somebody. And that was the first time as a kid, 6th grade me was just like, yo, I've never had anyone believe in me like that before, ever say anything so, nice to me, you know. And that's really when I think I started taking writing a little bit more seriously. And then growing up, I actually didn't write poems. I mean, I did. I messed around with poetry, but I was more interested in the short story form. And so I was writing a bunch of fiction for a long time until high school hit, and my English teacher then brought me down to the library, and she was like, "Yo, I need you to see this presentation." And it was my first spoken word poetry presentation. I went down, and a bunch of, you know, poets from the local community in Guam, they were doing like a little presentation and they were performing their work. And I was just blown away. I was like, yo, I didn't know poetry was allowed to sound that way. And yeah, they invited us to a poetry slam, and I loved the energy. It was my first poetry slam ever. I think I was like 17 years old at the time, and I was just like, yo, I got to try this out. And so I wrote my first poetry slam poem. I got on the mic, I competed, and at the time there were no youth and adult divisions in slam. It was just free for all at that time. So I had to go and compete against adults. So I was just like, okay, here we go. Little high school boy trying to go up against adults in a poetry competition. Let's see how this goes. I ended up getting third place that night. And I was like, yo, I think I could be good at this. And that's when I started taking poetry way more seriously. And I tell people, if I hadn't fallen in love with spoken word poetry, I would have never discovered my love for all forms of poetry. It was my portal, it was a gateway. And yeah, the rest is history, as they say. And one of the things that I noticed early on with my poems was that it was very socially justice like oriented. Um, my kind of understanding of cultural identity and politics started really when I started writing spoken word poems. And I started using spoken word poetry as a vehicle to get these ideas out. Ideas and concepts like self determination, indigenous people's rights to land, things like that. Concepts of culture and the detachment that many Filipinos feel who don't grow up in the Philippines, or who grow up in Guam or even stateside. Like, so those kinds of ideas were very, very prevalent in a lot of my earlier work. And I had a knack for being able to hold energy in a room before I even had the vocabulary to describe what I was doing. And so at the time, the folks who organized the poetry slam eventually invited me to become one of the organizers. So they took me from high school, and then they made me into an organizer. And I started teaching after school poetry workshops for high school students and middle school students. And so I decided, like, yo, this is dope. Like, I want to actually do this. Like, I'm doing poetry, I'm performing poetry. I might as well teach it too. And so yeah, as a 19-year-old kid, I was already running an entire poetry program for our island. I was the one sitting down with the superintendent of education for the island. I was meeting with government officials. I was talking to them about the importance of spoken word and the importance of like writing in general, and the importance of storytelling and developing a young kid's voice. And so I decided in college that I would get my bachelor's degree in English lit and then get my master's degree in teaching. And so that's what I did. So I like to tell people, like, yo, I've been teaching since I was 19. Um, and I kind of just I love teaching. I love poetry. I love speaking. I love getting on a stage and rocking a mic. And as I got better as a poet, as I got more refined as an educator, and my like speaking abilities, what I'm saying, like, people started to seeing the value in that, and started hiring me to teach beyond just my classroom. Started hiring me to teach in different places, different organizations. Um, and yeah, a lot of folks were just like, yo, we think Meta has some value to his work, and we want to get him here and, teach poetry and speak to our student body. Um, yeah, and I guess that's how everything came together as far as the platforms and the arts go.
I'm super blown away by this story and everything, mainly because, well, I mean, as important as like this journey has been, it's like that catalyst of having your teacher give you that kind of validation to continue that kind of thing. Like, were you doing all this kind of writing like underground, like you weren't really showing anybody until like that moment?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like, I I I always had an affinity for words. Like I remember the first time I ever freestyled, I was chilling underneath a street light with all the homies back in Guam after skateboarding, and I remember like busting this silly little rap about like Spider-Man and Superman and like wanting to save the world, you know. But it wasn't until that particular moment when a teacher that I actually admired and loved and respected said, "Hey, you have something special here and you need to chase it." That's when I was like, "Oh, bet, okay, let me do that." You know, and yeah, and I just took it way more seriously. I started studying it on a more like serious level, and at the time, like you know, at least for me culturally, like I was around a lot of like gang violence growing up, and so like to say like yeah, I'm a writer wasn't necessarily like a cool thing, right? But I stopped being afraid of that part of myself. I stopped being like embarrassed about it and started being proud of it. Like, yeah, I am a writer, son. Like this is what I do. I carry a journal, and when I have a cool idea, I write it in my journal. You know, so I was like one of the few little boys growing up who had a journal in his backpack and who would walk around in high school with a journal and a pen and in arms. And but yeah, it wasn't until that moment that a teacher said, "Yo, you got something, kid. You should do something with it."
Dude, that's super dope. Mainly because like I see that like in your music,
Mm,
especially with like some of the stuff you've been putting out as of late.
yeah.
Like not even just your music, but just like how you take on teaching, how you take on like speaking and everything. Like that kind of energy and that kind of growth and like claiming that as your own shows a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, man.
But I am curious. I mean, like you already kind of went into it a little bit, but like it seems like everything just fell into place when it came to like all your artistic platforms. But like,
Mm,
how do you intersect them like with one another, like on a, I guess on like a singular platform, if that makes sense.
yeah. Um, it's hard for me to explain to a lot of people because I feel like as humans, like in general, we love our categories. You know what I mean? Like we like to neatly place things in categories and in boxes, and so we do that all the time with even these kinds of titles: the poet, the educator, the speaker. But for me, I think it's not even about it is intersectionality is hella important, but I don't even view myself that way anymore. Like the only reason I even acknowledge those distinctions is for others so that they can make sense of what I actually am. But for me, I'm just like, yo, I'm just a dude, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, bro, but like, yo, I'm just a guy who loves to write. And I guess as far as intersection goes, like my poetry, the best way I can explain it, I think, is when I the first time I ever got hired as a full-time creative writing teacher for a public school system, I made sure to tell them at the interview, listen, I'm an artist, right? And there are going to be moments when like I have to leave school, I have to leave work to go be an artist. And I can't work for a school who cannot understand that. Because what I do as a poet and rapper directly informs and influences how I move as an educator and vice versa. The things that happen in school, the things that happen as a classroom teacher affect and inform what I write as an artist. You know what I mean? And so they're I wouldn't say they're symbiotic, but they're constantly in conversation with each other. The things I learn as an educator affect the techniques and the content that I create as an artist and vice versa. I think that's the best way I can explain it, bro. I'm sorry.
No, that makes complete sense and everything. Like at the end of the day, like what you do, I mean, like yeah, there's categories that help people understand a little bit more, but at the end of the day, that's all you doing that kind of stuff.
Right, for sure.
And I love that whole like um thing of just like knowing your value as an educator too, because it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're teaching a lot in these spaces where you do want to empower people on like different topics and everything, but like being
Right,
an artist in practice is so important because it's like you sure you're like speaking and like you're doing the talk, but are you really walking and everything? So like
right,
having that practice as an artist like in the like outside of the classroom makes a much bigger difference because like again you said like a lot of that stuff goes directly back into the classroom and especially like how things are changing like rapidly like every
Yep.
day. Like you need to be out there like as an artist to do that kind of stuff.
Right. 100%. And even in the classroom, it's like yo, you're hiring me because at least the way I see it and the way I understand my own values, like yo, props to every English lit teacher out there. It's hard. Like it's hard out here, son. Like to teach in a public school is difficult on so many levels for so many reasons. But not every English lit teacher or creative writing teacher teaches what they live. You know what I mean? Like, yo, I'm not just teaching you similes and metaphors. Like, yo, this is what I do. I'm not just teaching you rhetoric. This is what I do. You know, I'm not giving you a PowerPoint presentation on the importance of art and change. Like, I'm in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like I got homies who lead at the forefront of these efforts on the street. You know, like it's not just theory. It's not just classroom material. It's life to me, and I think that's part of why I stopped undervaluing myself because I learned that. I was like, yo, there's not too many teachers who actually teach what they live and live what they teach.
To be honest, like thinking about that, that's totally true. Like I can't even count how many. I mean, like I could count like how many teachers like live what they do, but that's more like more practical stuff. Like
Right.
in terms of I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where I was gonna go with this, but like there are people that I see or teachers that I've had that do practice what they do, but in terms of things like English and everything, like I don't
Mm,
see a lot of teachers practicing that kind of stuff, and
right.
that's big, and especially like what you're putting out into the community or what you're putting out in like all these other spaces brings a lot more meaning to the work that you're going to bring back to the classroom, and that's big.
For sure. 100%.
So going on to like yourself as an artist, like this is kind of like a loaded question and everything, but like
Mm,
what does your artistic process look like? Like how do you come up with some of these stories that like pop into your head? Like is it the experiences you have, or is it like
mm.
just random things that come into your head? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I definitely write a lot from experience. One of my main philosophies as an artist is you can't write what you don't know. And so your best work is going to be coming always from a place of of expertise and knowledge, and like we have PhDs in our own lives, you know? Like you're not going to tell me I don't know this because dude, I've lived it. And so that's definitely a big part of my artistic process. Vulnerability is definitely a big part of my artistic process. I was just teaching a class today, and we was talking about vulnerability and why it's so powerful. And you know, like like a lot of what our my kids were saying, they were like, "Yo, vulnerability. If you are vulnerable, you give other people permission to be vulnerable too, and that vulnerability allows a deeper, more meaningful connection. You know." And so vulnerability is a big part of my artistic process too. But as far as like actual technique and like the writing itself, I one of the best pieces of advice I ever got, man, was like writing is not the act of putting a pen to a page. It's not the act of running your fingers over a keyboard. Writing is something you do in your mind all the time. That is the true act of writing. You're constantly looking at things, you're constantly observing, you're constantly feeling things, and you're just writing in your head all the time. So like when I'm walking around, man, when I'm moving through the world, when things are happening to me, I'm literally thinking of lines. I'm literally thinking of stanzas and rhymes as things happen to me. And that I think has been the cornerstone, I think, of my writing and artistic process these days is that I'm always writing, not necessarily pen to paper, but like it's just this constant thing. It's like an engine that never turns off inside of my head, and that's been so clutch with my development and my tenacity and my ability to create. Some people have this notion that like, oh, you need to spend a everyday writing. I used to do that when I was a lot younger, but I don't do that anymore. Like I give myself space. Like, yo, I don't want to put pen to paper and I don't want to type anything out for like 2 weeks, and I'll come back to it when I'm ready, because I know in my head I'm still revising like lines and stanzas and verses without ever even touching a notebook. Um, yeah, just giving myself permission to like it's okay not to sit down and write anything as long as I'm as long as the engine is running in my head. I think, yeah, that's how my artistic process looks like these days.
Oh, dude, a few things. So just with that point alone, that just shows like how much like that artistic process essentially just embodies like how you are. I mean, like you said, the engine is running constantly, and especially like giving yourself those kind of breaks to just experience life and stuff.
Yep.
Like that brings out a different side of like and your like artistry and everything. So that's like super dope. And another thing with that whole vulnerability point, you're one of the few like cats that I see actually like talking about that kind of stuff, especially like in
Mm,
your craft. Like, I
mm,
mean, with your book, like with the music that you've been putting out, like, dude,
mm.
even at Lumika, like, I think there was like a point in your set where you were just like, yo, let me be, can I be vulnerable, like, real quick? Like, yo, I
Yeah.
don't hear a lot of cats like say that kind of stuff. And I think that's like really dope. Like, why is that so important, like, for you personally to have that kind of vulnerability towards people?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like my best work has emerged from my willingness to be vulnerable. And I just trust that part of the process of, because people talk a lot about like, yo, you need to build your fan base. You need to work on your brand. You know what I mean? And like all of these like kind of clinical, sterile approaches to art and marketing. But in my mind, it's like I just want genuine connections with people. Like I don't know, maybe it's because I'm a little older than a lot of other cats who are on the come up, but like I value a genuine connection even if it means it's just tonight on this stage. I want this connection to be genuine. I want you to walk away and think, "Wow, that was a real performance." You know, like I forget who said the quote, but you're probably not going to remember any of my rhymes, but you're going to remember how it made you feel that night, right? And that's what I want. Like the fact that you and I even were able to form a connection beyond the show and chill and hang out, you know, like that's all part of it. Like as an artist, I didn't have to go hang out at someone's Airbnb, right? Like that takes vulnerability too. That in itself is vulnerability to be like, yeah, I'm going to go hang out with a bunch of strangers that I have never met, that I don't know. That's part of vulnerability too. Vulnerability looks so many different ways. Because how many cats you met who are just so like, all right, get off stage and disappear? I met so many cats like that. Too good, you know? But for me, it's like, yo, I'm just trying to build genuine connections with folks. And for me, I think I care most about that, whether it's on stage, whether I'm speaking as a keynote address, whether I'm in the classroom. I just care so much about genuine connection.
Man, that's another big thing because like you were just mentioning at the beginning, like a lot of the dudes, like as important as it is for someone to build up their fan base and stuff and just like the marketing, I mean, that's good with like business and everything, but I'm just like, are you gonna leave that legacy behind as like this dope
Mm,
person you could like connect to? Because a lot of I can't really count a lot of people that have that kind of connection and everything. Like you said, dude, there are a lot of like people out there that are kind of just like, yo, let me just do this show and leave and everything. It's just
yeah.
like you don't get that kind of like genuine connection. I mean, like you said, the whole us kicking at the air, like that whole weekend, just kicking at the Airbnb, like kicking it at
Yeah.
like Jenna's like family restaurant. Like, dude, artists
Yeah.
don't technically have to do that, but it's like you're
Right.
giving a lot to yourself, and it's just like it's another layer of that connection towards the people that you're going to be presenting to. Also, it's like you're also creating that like friendship, that relationship with people, and it's like
Right.
it goes beyond just the whole like it just goes beyond the whole performance.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, okay. So this is kind of like another big question and everything, but like
Mm.
as an artist, have you experienced any kind of like blocks or like obstacles like along your journey?
Yeah. Um, so one of the things I remember as a young kid, there's this term that got introduced to me, and it's introduced to everybody, is writer's block, right? Like, oh man, I got writer's block. That's why I can't write. And so it took me a really long time to figure out how to handle writer's block as a concept. And so now when a young kid comes up to me and asks me that question, like, hey Meta, what kind of advice can you give to writer's block? they kind of look at me like I'm dumb, but I'm like, the answer is it doesn't exist. and and I'm just like, yeah, the answer is it doesn't exist. And I tell them, stop looking at it like a block, because when you say block, you're seeing a wall, you're seeing a brick wall, whatever, right? But if you're like, this is just a fog, you're just stuck in a fog. The fog will eventually lift. The fog will eventually fade, and you'll gain clarity again. The trick is asking yourself, what can I do to blow the fog away faster? And so I've developed, things to help my writer's fog dissipate much quicker. And that oftentimes, weirdly enough, looks like not writing. It looks like going back to the things that make me happy, putting on my boxing gloves and just going a few rounds on the boxing bag, watching anime, playing games. Do the things that make you happy, and the writing fog will dissipate. As far as more like big obstacles, I think rejection is perhaps the biggest obstacle I've faced on my journey. Um, we all know how it feels. Maybe not all. Maybe some of y'all are lucky out there and you don't know how it feels to be rejected by someone you love or like a romantic interest growing up. But getting rejected in your art, it hurts like 1,000 times more. I don't know if people believe that, but man, I've taken so many rejection letters over this decade, and it never stops hurting. Like, you get a rejection letter and you think the next one won't sting as much. The rejection letter hurts just as much. And so one of the biggest obstacles I've faced, which eventually led to the creation of my latest album called This Road, was getting rejected by Netflix. And the show was Rhythm and Flow with T.I., Cardi B, and Chance the Rapper as judges. And, I went through the entire interview and audition process. I thought I did really well. Their um, casting director loved me. Even told me like, I'm gonna do my best to pitch you to the network, and we'll go from there. And so when I finally saw that Netflix was shooting in the city of Denver, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't get the casting role. And so I emailed them personally. I found the dude's email. And yeah, I kind of just, laid it out and was like, I'm just curious as to to what's going on. And he gave me the bad news and was like, we're not telling every single person who didn't get on. We're not sending anyone updates, but he emailed me back and he just told me that it's not even about talent at this point. It's about production and all the various ways that productions are put together. And so rejection, man, and just, it's such a big, big, big obstacle. I went into a very deep depression, to be honest. um I remember like chilling out for a couple weeks after that, and my kuya was like, yo, dude, are you okay? And like, we never have emotional conversations, to be honest, but he asked like, dude, are you okay? You don't seem like yourself. And I didn't even realize that I had slipped into this really deep depressed state after the rejection. But I wanted to quit, yo. I really wanted to quit. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I questioned everything I'd ever done up until that point. Like, yo, why didn't I get on this rap show? Like, I deserve to be on this rap show. I'm good enough to be on this rap show. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so I kind of had like this breakdown artistically in my head. And so my only remedy really at the point was to write myself out of the hole, was to build a ladder out of words and climb. Wow, that was good. Yo, I need to write that down. And and that's what I did. And so I wrote the album This Road, and in one of the songs I talk about that. I actually, many of the songs, but I straight up talk about like disappearing from the internet and like people not knowing where the heck I went because I was just so depressed. I needed to get away from it all for a while. And yeah, just taking rejections and keeping it moving after the rejections. Phew, that's so hard to do. One of the biggest obstacles I've had to face.
Oh man, that is a big blow, and like even though like I wasn't in your shoes, it's just like that is a huge blow like artistically because it's like that whole validity that you have for
Mm,
yourself is just kind of like it kind of feels like it's out the door. But like I'm super happy that like you're able to come out thriving. I'm like, dude, I mean the last track like on that album,
Mm,
everything good I have, that's like,
right.
I mean that's like reclaiming that validity towards yourself as like an MC, a writer, just like overall as a person. It's like, yo, dude, I'm happy you're thriving from that because it's like
Right.
a lot of people don't aren't able to get out of that rut sometimes, and it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, you even said it yourself, man. Like you were on the verge of quitting, and that's like
Yeah.
to quit like something you're so passionate about is like that is a scary road to look at. And
Oh
I'm
my
like,
gosh. Yeah.
I really I don't wish that upon anyone else, but it's like it's it's kind of weird because it sounds like it also taught you more about yourself, like
Oh.
with this
Mhm.
experience and everything.
Oh yeah, 100%. It kind of made me it gave me clarity as to what I'm really about, you know? Not that I was confused or anything, but it was just more like you said, validity, and just kind of like this repurposing, you know, in my life, and just kind of reprioritizing and redefining what success truly means to me. That's definitely something that I came away with battling that rejection. Um, and yeah, and I'm 100% better for it. Oh, totally, totally.
Ooh, okay. So going on to like our little mid segment question that I usually have for everyone. Like
Mm,
I want to gauge where like everyone's at in terms of like future projects, what their like outlook is for
yeah.
what things they want to do and everything. So do you have like a dream project that you want to pursue, or is there like a next big thing that you're currently working on?
Yeah. Man, I feel like I have so many projects in the vault, man, to be honest, but I think for this coming winter, I'm actually switching gears and delving back into my poems, and I really want to complete my next manuscript, um, and really try to push it through a publishing house this time around, and you know, rack up some awards with that manuscript. That's like something that I'm really, really kind of trying to dial myself into and get mentally and emotionally prepared for, because I have bare bones for it, but I know that the labor needed to take it to its kind of final phases and polishing is going to be intense. So I think that's really truly up next for me as far as like the big project that I have in mind to close 2020. And it'll be a quiet process, you know. No one will really know about it until it's ready for reveal in 2021. But yeah, I'm super excited to kind of just delve back into the poems and really flesh out this manuscript. There's a lot of key concepts and ideas that I feel like I've been speaking about for so long, but haven't been producing work that really reflects what I've been speaking on. So, you know, taking kind of Tire Shoes Kid as a base point and refining my viewpoints on like masculinity and manhood and healing, like those three concepts and ideas are going to be really, really kind of, I'm going to do a deep dive into those concepts and really polish and show people a more mature version of that in the next manuscript, I think. And I'm just super excited for it, yo.
Dude, I'm super excited for it too. But like with these topics that like you're speaking on, is that like what was
Mm.
were those things like going in your mind like the thing that made it click? Like, yo, I wanna like refine like all these topics that I've already been speaking on, like and then put them in like another book. Like what was the thing that made it click that this is the next thing you want to do?
Yeah, that's, oh man, that's actually a really great question. I think I actually think um over the last 2.5 years, I've been working a lot with men and young boys in like these kind of restorative spaces. So I worked in a halfway house for men. For those of you who are unfamiliar with a halfway house, it's basically, I don't necessarily like the term, but a halfway house is like a facility where released prisoners, or you know, uh, people who are finishing out their paroles must live before they're let. back into society as like a functioning member of society. And just in that, yo, there's like there were so many stories and like with the system and how we treat men's mental health. Like there was just so much stuff I had to say about it already just working at Halfway House. And I think that's really what made it click for me was like men who are old enough to be my grandfather and boys who are young enough to be my little brother, like the spectrum at which so many wild things happen and like injustices and just ignorance and the failing of our rehabilitation systems, like just so many of that informed this next manuscript, I think, for me, and that's what made it click.
Ooh, so it's kind of just like the reality check of like what's
Mm,
going on right now that's making you want to like do this deep dive like once again, right?
yeah, yeah, because I think for me the moment was I forget, I was sitting in the Halfway House and I was talking to one of the like the younger guys, and he said something like, "Yo, man, please don't judge me for this. Please don't judge me for this." Like we are prepping him for an interview, and he was about to tell me like his felony, and he's like, "Man, please don't judge me for this." And yeah, he laid it on the table, and I remember thinking, like, bro, that's a charge that I might have ended up with when I was younger, you know, when I was around a bunch of like all that gang violence that I was around. Like this is a charge that I might have caught a long time ago. And how can I judge you for a mistake that I might have made? And that's when I was like, yo, I need to write about this. Yeah. And just yeah,
Yo,
like you said, this hard reality check.
oh man, so it was kind of looking like at a past self or like a past kind of timeline like this could have happened. It's
Yeah.
like it's a I mean just seeing that possibility is like
Yep.
it's mind blowing to think about that.
Right. 100%. Yep.
But dude, I am definitely excited for like this next project that you're having out, man. I'm like I
Thank you, bro.
enjoyed like Tie Your Shoes Kid. Like that was really amazing and I'm super excited for you to dive deep into like this next one.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Oof, I'm excited.
Heck yeah, man. So going back to like the other questions and everything. So
Hmm.
I mean, you speak a lot about like different kinds of topics in like your music and poetry and everything. Like you do like a lot of storytelling from your life. You talk about like masculinity and everything, like being vulnerable, but like do you have a specific like narrative you want to speak like in your music, like an overarching kind of theme?
I can't say that I do, to be honest. Like an overarching theme. I don't know that I do, to be honest, as far as like a particular narrative, but I can say maybe I can speak more to like my mission as an artist with both my music and poetry. And for me, I never had the language for it, obviously, when I was younger, but now I do. And really, for me, I want to just continue to create music and poems that, at the end of it all, will help energize and uplift the communities that I care for most. And that's ultimately what I try to do.
Oh man, if that's not grassroots work, I don't know what is.
You know what I'm saying? For sure, bro. 100%.
Honestly, I love how you put it as like your mission and vision and everything. Like the I guess what I was like trying to formulate with that question is mainly because
Mm.
I mean, I've been seeing like a lot of other like MCs or poets and everything kind of going for like this kind of gimmick, but like with the way that or like how diverse like all your stuff is, it's just like yo, you're
Right.
speaking like your truth. You're speaking about like what you wanna like talk about. Like this is the stuff that's important to you, and it's not like if
Mm.
like there's a lot of authenticity that comes from the stuff you put out, and it's like it's a big refresher to hear that kind of stuff.
For sure. Thank you, bro. I appreciate that.
So going on to the next one, like out of all the projects you put out, or like the things you've been featured on, or even like the shows you've done, like what have been like your all time favorite just to like participate in?
Oh man, this one is so hard, bro.
Because I
Cause
mean, you
it's
kind of done like a lot.
yeah, and oh man, they're all special. Every one of them is special in their own way, and it's like, man, how do I choose? How do I choose? Um, let me think. Let me give me like 10 seconds. I think I'm gonna go with 2015. I was one of the winners selected for the Spoken Word for the World competition. And so they chose four winners. And it just so happened that all four winners of this particular contest had Asian Pacific Islander roots. And the contest was held to find poets who were using their stories and their voices to bring light on climate change. And because I was in Guam, and at the time of the contest, there was legit this really nasty haze from fires that had blown over from Papua New Guinea. And the fires were started because they were being slashed and burned. Um, and I just remember reading about it and like, yo, these forests and trees that they're trying to get and cut down and all that, they're used for, I think, palm oil. And it's the same ingredient that goes into all of our shampoo. It goes into all of our lotion, you know. And I just remember drawing connections between like how, like, yo, our daily comforts lead to these catastrophic events that devastate the planet. Um, I remember winning that contest, and then the winners were flown to Paris to speak at the United Nations climate negotiations. And that was the first time I felt like, wow, I I just as a writer reached a completely new level because I'm about to go on this trip with these amazing artists um and learn from them. And I think that was my favorite thing about the trip. I learned so much from Teresa Sigatanu, from oh my gosh, from all of them, from Kathy, you know, from Issa, from Eunice, and they're just such amazing warrior poets that I sat down and learned so much from them. Um, and just to be able to bring our voices of the Asia Pacific region into the United Nations spaces, into like climate researchers and other type of scientists, because climate change is a scary topic for a lot of people, partly because they don't understand the science behind it. It's just a scary thing to talk about. But we were able to bring our stories in and give it a human voice. And I remember I think the president or CEO of I think 350.org said something like, he's so proud that the poets are here because poetry is proof of our physics. I remember sitting there like, oh my gosh, snaps. That was such a good line. Like, this dude a poet. But yeah, it just felt like I'm it was just a clear moment for me. Like, I'm using my work for something so much bigger than myself. And I remember thinking back to Miss Reglos and thinking, damn, is this what she meant all those years ago? You know? Is this what she meant? And I think that's going to be one of my favorite moments of all time.
It kind of just like it sounds like at that moment when you were there, like on this trip, it's everything that came from like that moment you had with your teacher back in like school and everything. It kind of just came full circle in that kind of sense.
Yeah, it was wild. It was so wild, bro.
I mean,
So wild.
like, dude, just thinking about that, like when your teacher said like, or like even the people like you've encountered, it's like, yo, dude, you're gonna go places. Like, did you think this kind of, I don't know, this kind of like thing was gonna happen? Like, I mean, what was the, I don't know, dude. It's like when I think about these kinds of things, it's just like you wouldn't know how far you're gonna go with something until you actually reach that point. So like, where did you think
Right.
like you were going when you first started doing this and like taking it seriously?
Dude, bro, I had no idea. I just had the same stereotypical images of success and stereotypical definitions of success with the money and the house and the crib and the clothes and the bling. You know what I mean? Like, okay, maybe that's where I'm headed. And then you start to figure out like, yo, the way you move and the things that inspire you, your version of success is going to look so different. There's no way it's going to look like that, you know? And for me, like being flown to Paris and taken care of and like completely taken care of, bro. Like that I don't know too many rappers who can say that they got that experience, as far as the stereotypical definitions of success go. But yeah, just being able to, I think for me, I never knew, I could have never anticipated that I could write something I truly love that aligns with my mission and have it feed me and have it be more than just soul food and have it be actually tangible, like a trip, like money, like getting paid and taken care of. I think for me, that's what tripped me out the most. I was like, wow, that's it. You are allowed to do what you love and let what you love take care of you too. Like that's 100% allowed. And that was one of the trips that made me realize that.
Dude, I mean that goes into the whole thing of like authenticity and everything and vulnerability.
Mm,
Like you're giving yourself to this art, like you're giving like your whole authentic self like as you're doing this, and it's like I don't know. I personally believe if like you're giving yourself like in that kind of way, like all the pieces will fall into the place, fall into place,
mm-hmm.
and like you'll be where like I don't know where something or someone or like some kind of initiative needs you at that point. It's like
Right.
it's kind of just like if you're being like authentic, your authentic self, the path will eventually like manifest like some
Yeah.
way somehow. You won't know what it's gonna look like, but it's just gonna like I wouldn't say pop up, but it's like it's there. It's gonna happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you'll find it, It's kind of like magnets almost. Like it's just going to attract each other.
Yeah, dude. It's like you're gravitating towards essentially like where you need to be, and it's like, dang,
Right.
that's a big reality check, man. Just like being there, like doing what you
Mm-hmm.
love, like that's definitely a sign of success if I could like ever define it in like the most practical way.
Right. Yeah. I agree 100%.
And going into this last one, this is
Mm-hmm.
more I think you've already talked about this like quite a bit, just especially with like how you present yourself and stuff, but like what do you feel like it means to be original as an artist?
Mm, man. Yeah. I just feel like knowing your roots, right? And by roots, uh, that could mean a lot of things. That could mean your cultural identity, your political understanding, your political upbringing, but just knowing truly where you come from, because we come from more than just a geographical location, right? We come from people, we come from ideas. Understanding who you are and not being ashamed to let that show up in your work, however that shows up in your work. I think that's the quickest way to become an original artist, and originally you. There's a tendency I've noticed, especially with a lot of younger artists, and I had the same tendency too. Is to echo or like um, emulate the artist that you look up to or whatever is trending in pop culture. So that goes from writing style to sound to fashion to everything in pop culture. But like, how you gonna stand out if you're just producing more of the same? You know, and you got to figure out what makes you uniquely you, and not be afraid to let that shine.
It's kind of just like that whole notion of, I mean, this happens like quite a lot, unfortunately, but like I do see like a lot of people like biting each other's stuff. It's like
Yeah.
when it comes to like competition, when it comes to like I don't know the ciphers and everything, like
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's okay to look up to someone and everything, but it's like if you're becoming that person, it's like
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, are you really you at the end of the day? You're kind of just like a clone. Like I think there was something that like a friend of mine said that was like you can take my moves as much as you want, but you're not gonna take my style at the end of the day.
Oh, 100%. I agree with that, yo. I 100% agree with that. And it's just like, let me just use a basketball example because I feel like, we're in the conference finals right now, but like Kobe, rest in power to Kobe. Um, Kobe became Kobe because he wasn't concerned about being Jordan. You know what I mean? And that I guess that's what I want younger artists to understand. Is like, if you're so concerned about being the next XYZ, you're never going to be the first you. And that's just such an important thing. And there's so much emotional, spiritual, and mental labor that goes into even figuring out who you are, that if you're not focused on that primarily, you're never going to get there.
Ooh, dude, you're actually diving a lot into like our little advice section for the end of the episode, but
Mm,
that's super true. It's like, I mean, with the example with Kobe and everything, it's like this dude has had his own mindset. I mean, the whole Mamba mentality and everything. Like, I've seen people try to like recreate that kind of stuff, but at the end of the day, that's like his kind of, or like
mm-hmm.
was his kind of like then moving forward. I mean, people could always try to copy someone, but at the end of the day, you're kind of just a carbon copy, and it's like
Yeah,
if you're not gonna be like what you feel like is the most you, then it's like I don't know, you're not gonna last as long and everything, and you might end up getting called out for that kind of stuff too.
for sure. And it's not to say that, like, you know, I'm sure Kobe looked up to Jordan as much as anyone else, you know. Um, and yeah, maybe there were moves here and there early on in the career that's like, yo, that was totally an MJ thing to do, whatever. But I think as far as advice goes, right? Like, understanding that you're on a journey to discover and create yourself, but also understanding that, yo, everything is a remix. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm learning that at my new school that I teach at, is like, yo, everything truly is a remix, but what makes it uniquely yours is the ingredient that makes it uniquely yours is you. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, you are the ingredient. Um, and everything else though is just a remix, and what makes it special is what you brings particularly to the recipe.
Dang man, so far like every single interview that I've had like on this season, there's always been that one line. I mean, as great as like the whole interview's been with like everyone else, it's like there's
Mm.
always that one line that really like sticks out, and it makes me think like, oh, everything's a remix. Like I could see that on the shirt, like kind of joking about that, but it's like
Yeah.
it's true with that kind of thing. It's like there's foundation that's been set up by like so many other
Mm.
people, but at the end of the
Right.
day, you're essentially taking whatever that foundation is and flipping it for like your own
Right.
like benefit, but also understanding that like what you're doing is some kind of inspiration from someone else, but like
Right.
you're still your original self at the end of the day.
Exactly. Exactly, yo.
Oh man, was there any like lasting things you want to say about like this whole authenticity thing before we close this off?
Nah, man, I feel like, I hope I said a lot. I hope someone out there listening finds a gem or two in there. I just think that the world would be such a better place if we all worked at being more of our authentic self. And I highly encourage everybody to try it because it feels good, man.
Dude, I'm happy that you say that, especially since you embody that to like a T, man. And I feel like not
Thank
enough
you.
people like see that, or like not enough people like kind of do their own thing. And it's just like I really enjoy it when I see someone like truly being like their most authentic self, and you really embody that.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for saying that and having me on the podcast, man. I appreciate that.
Dude, thank you for being on, man. Like I like this vibe and everything because like I
Yeah.
mean we only had like those 3 days like in Houston, so I'm just like, yo, this is
Right.
a lot like deeper
Yeah.
than like I wish we had like this talk like back over at the B&B, but like with everything like kind of just like
Mm,
wild and everything, it's like, yo,
right.
this is a nice little one-on-one to have to see like where your brain's going. So I appreciate you for like having this really dope vibe and everything.
For sure. Thank you so much, man. Thank you.
So before we end this off, did you have like any shout outs or any kind of like plugs that you wanted to like put out before we end this off?
Nah, not really. I mean, I just really want to shout out everybody out there grinding. Shout outs to you, Alfredo. Like, this is really dope, giving our peoples and cultivating space for our peoples, to share our stories and really just celebrate our value. So shout outs to you, shout outs to all the listeners. Yeah, just shout outs to them, man.
And thank you again, man. Shout out to you for being on this episode once again. And again, thank you for all this. Thank you all for listening to this amazing episode. And we're gonna have a lot more amazing guests for the rest of the season. So make sure to stay tuned and everything. So thanks again for listening. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Peace.